The courtroom was filled with the low murmur of conversations and the shuffling of papers. The sun streamed through tall windows, catching the polished wood of the benches and the gleaming brass of the judge's podium. Every seat was occupied, from the front row reserved for the lawyers to the gallery, packed with spectators who had come to witness a case that had already stirred the city's curiosity. The atmosphere was tense, a mixture of anticipation, anxiety, and subtle judgment. This was not a routine day in court. Something about the energy in the room suggested that today might be different. Judge Harold Whitman adjusted his robe, a subtle frown etched on his face. He glanced over the docket for the day, clearing his throat before addressing the courtroom. "Order in the court," he said, his voice firm yet calm. "We are here today to hear the case of State versus Thomas Miller, accused of burglary at a local residence. All parties present, please rise." The sound of feet scraping against the polished floor filled the room as everyone stood. The defendant, Thomas Miller, a tall man with a nervous, twitching hand, remained seated, glancing anxiously toward his attorney. His eyes flicked toward the gallery, where murmurs rippled among the spectators. Thomas's reputation had already been tainted by rumors, though no conviction had yet been made. Some of the audience leaned forward, eager to see how the case would unfold, and a few exchanged quiet comments about how serious the charges were. Among the crowd, a small figure suddenly appeared, holding tightly onto a man's hand. She was tiny, no more than 3 years old, with curly brown hair tied in a small ponytail. Her bright, curious eyes scanned the room with an intensity that belied her age. This was Emily, the daughter of the victim, who had accompanied her father to court. Most of the spectators barely noticed the small child at first, assuming she would quietly sit in her father's lap. But Emily had something on her mind, something that would soon make every person in the room take notice. Beside the judge, near the front of the courtroom, sat a large German shepherd. Rex, a seasoned police dog, remained alert, his ears perked and eyes scanning the room with quiet intelligence. He belonged to Officer Daniels, his handler, who sat nearby, clipboard in hand, ready to respond to any instruction. Rex had been trained in search and rescue, suspect apprehension, and subtle detection cues. Today, however, he was supposed to remain calm and professional, unnoticed by the public. But as Emily's eyes met his, there was an unspoken recognition between the child and the dog, though no one else could sense it yet. Emily tugged slightly at her father's hand, pointing toward Rex with a tiny finger. "Daddy, he knows," she whispered softly, the words barely audible over the courtroom hum. Her father bent down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "SHH, sweetheart," he whispered back, trying not to draw attention. "Just stay calm." But Emily's gaze never left Rex. There was a certain determination in her eyes, a clarity that seemed far beyond her years. She wasn't just observing. She was waiting for something, as if she knew her role in the day's events would be pivotal. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Corinne Blake, began her opening statement, packing slightly before the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, the case before you is simple in its facts but significant in its consequences. On the night of April 12th, the defendant, Mr. Miller, is accused of unlawfully entering the residence of Mr. David Carter and removing property without consent. Evidence will be presented showing his presence at the scene, and we will prove intent." She clicked a stack of photographs and documents together, her voice firm but measured. Meanwhile, Thomas Miller's defense attorney, a calm, older man named Jonathan Reed, nodded respectfully before responding. "The prosecution will attempt to paint my client as guilty without question," he said, his voice smooth. "But you will see that evidence is incomplete, circumstantial, and cannot withstand careful scrutiny. My client deserves fairness, impartiality, and a verdict based solely on facts." The room listened intently, the words echoing in the tall courtroom, filling the air with tension. Emily shifted in her father's arms, her small body restless but focused. She kept her eyes locked on Rex, who sat perfectly still yet emanated a quiet readiness. Something about the dog's calm, measured presence seemed to resonate with her, giving her courage she hadn't known she had. Most people might have overlooked the subtle connection between a 3-year-old child and a trained police dog, but Emily sensed it immediately. She had spent time with Rex during previous visits with her father, learning to trust his instincts without fully understanding why. Today, she felt she needed to do more than just watch. The courtroom settled as the judge called for order. "All rise," he intoned again, signaling the jury to stand. Emily's tiny fingers tightened around her father's hand, her gaze unwavering. There was a quiet energy building in the room, something intangible yet palpable. Spectators began to sense that this trial would be unlike any other. Some whispered nervously to their neighbors, wondering what role, if any, the little girl might play. Yet no one could guess how significant her presence would become. Officer Daniels shifted slightly, nodding Emily's interest in Rex. The dog's ears flicked toward the child, and his tail remained still but tense, a subtle sign of readiness. Only Emily seemed to understand the silent language that passed between them. She straightened in her father's arms, her eyes sharp and focused, as if rehearsing something she knew she had to do. Even at 3 years old, her intuition was extraordinary, and Rex's trained instincts were attuned to notice it. Together, they shared a silent anticipation that no one else in the courtroom could perceive. As the judge prepared to call the first witness, Emily's father whispered softly, "Stay calm, Emily." But she barely responded, her attention completely fixed on Rex. The prosecutor was arranging documents on her desk, the defense attorney whispered to his client, and the spectators murmured quietly. In this sea of seriousness and tension, a silent bond between a child and a dog quietly grew, unnoticed but profound. Something was about to happen, something that would leave everyone in the courtroom frozen, and forever remember the day Emily and Rex communicated without words. And as Emily took a deep breath, gripping her father's hand, the room seemed to hold its breath along with her. No one yet knew that her small voice, combined with the instincts of a police dog, would soon become the pivot on which truth, justice, and awe would turn. Emily's father led her down the long aisle toward the front of the courtroom, her tiny hand clasped tightly in his. She paused occasionally to glance around, her wide eyes taking in every detail. The tall, imposing judge, the sharply dressed lawyers, the spectators craning their necks, and most importantly, Rex. The German shepherd's powerful presence drew her gaze instantly. Something about him made her feel safe, like he already understood her purpose in this serious, unfamiliar world. The murmurs of the spectators grew louder as whispers spread. A toddler in the courtroom was unusual, and many wondered why she had to be there at all. "Is that the victim's daughter?" someone asked softly, their voice laced with curiosity. "I can't believe she's brought a child here," another murmured, shaking their head. Emily's father, David Carter, gave a faint smile, brushing a curl from her forehead. "She's brave," he whispered, "and she wants to help." Emily had spent many hours with Rex before. The police dog had been trained for countless situations, tracking scents, detecting illegal substances, apprehending suspects. But with Emily, he responded differently. She didn't give commands like the officers did. Instead, she offered small gestures, subtle movements, and quiet attention. Somehow, Rex understood her in a way no one else did. And today, Emily felt that understanding would matter more than anyone could guess. The judge, Harold Whitman, adjusted his glasses as he observed the unusual scene. He had presided over hundreds of cases, from petty thefts to serious felonies, but he had never seen a courtroom visitor as small and determined as Emily. Something about the child's calm, focused demeanor made him pause, his gaze flicking occasionally toward her. He was no stranger to unexpected moments in court, yet this felt different, quietly tense, and potentially significant. Officer Daniels, Rex's handler, sat a few feet away, clipboard resting on his lap. He noticed Emily staring at Rex and felt a familiar stir of anticipation. The dog's ears twitched subtly, and his posture shifted, though only faintly. Daniels knew Rex well enough to recognize the signs. This wasn't casual curiosity from a child. Something deeper was happening, an unspoken understanding, a connection that promised action. He kept a hand near the dog's collar, ready to intervene if needed, but confident Rex would respond carefully. Emily's father guided her to a small chair at the front, placing her safely beside him. She sat with a poise that surprised everyone. Despite her age, her attention was unwavering. She tilted her head slightly, eyes locked on Rex as if reading his every thought. The spectators tried to follow the trial proceedings, but their attention kept drifting to the girl and the dog. Something about their silent communication was magnetic, unexplainable, and quietly commanding the room's curiosity. The prosecutor, Corinne Blake, began arranging documents on her desk. She was a sharp, meticulous woman, known for her composure under pressure. But today, she could not ignore the little girl who had arrived unexpectedly, whispering quietly to her father and staring at the police dog. She exchanged a glance with the defense attorney, Jonathan Reed, whose calm exterior masked his own curiosity. Even seasoned professionals could feel when the air in a room shifted subtly, signaling that something extraordinary might occur. Emily's eyes never left Rex. She leaned slightly forward, murmuring words only her father could hear. "He knows, Daddy, he knows what to do." Her father's hand tightened gently around hers. "SHH, just stay calm," he whispered, his own pulse quickening. He had no idea what she planned, but he trusted her instincts. Emily's confidence had grown over time, shaped by her love for Rex and the quiet lessons she had learned during previous encounters with the dog. Today, her courage would be tested, and the courtroom would soon bear witness. The gallery of spectators settled into an uneasy silence as the first witness was called. A neighbor, Ms. Lillian Moore, took the stand to recount what she had seen on the night of the burglary. She spoke hesitantly, describing a figure near the house, the sound she had heard, and the frightened expression she had noticed. Her testimony was factual but dry, leaving gaps that could be exploited by either side. Emily's gaze, however, never wavered from Rex, who remained poised, alert, and seemingly aware of every nuance of the unfolding events. Emily began to fidget slightly in her seat, a small sign of impatience. She leaned forward again, whispering to her father, "He'll know what to do, right?" David Carter nodded, brushing her hair from her face. "He'll do his job, Emily, just like you've trained him." The words were quiet, meant only for her, yet they captured the essence of the extraordinary partnership forming between a tiny child and a powerful, intelligent dog. It was a partnership that defied the expectations of everyone in the courtroom. Meanwhile, the suspect, Thomas Miller, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He had heard rumors of Rex's skills, of the dog's uncanny ability to detect and respond in critical situations, but he had never anticipated that a child would be involved. His eyes darted nervously toward Emily, wondering what role she could possibly play. He felt a strange, inexplicable unease as the girl remained calm, focused, and entirely unshaken by the intimidating courtroom environment. Emily's attention to Rex was unbroken. She began to communicate silently, her gestures subtle but deliberate, a small tilt of her head, a tiny wave of her hand, a shift in her gaze. To anyone else, it looked like the innocent movements of a child adjusting in her seat, but Rex understood every signal. His posture became even more attentive, every muscle ready to respond. Officer Daniels noticed the heightened alertness in the dog and prepared himself. Something remarkable was about to happen, though the timing remained a mystery to everyone but Emily and Rex. The judge called for a brief recess, sensing the tension in the room was building. Spectators murmured excitedly as lawyers whispered strategies, trying to anticipate the next phase of the trial. Emily remained calm, her small frame steady beside her father. She looked at Rex and in her own quiet way signaled, "Soon." The dog's ears flicked, a barely noticeable motion that told her he understood. In that brief moment, an invisible thread connected the child and the dog, a bond built on trust, instinct, and shared purpose. When the court reconvened, Emily's focus did not waver. She had positioned herself mentally for what she knew would be the decisive moment. The jury took their seats, the lawyers adjusted their papers, and the judge lifted his gavel, calling the room to order. The spectators, unaware of the quiet drama that was about to unfold, settled into tense silence. All eyes would soon be on a child, a dog, and two words that would leave the courtroom frozen in disbelief. Emily's father whispered one last reassurance, barely audible over the murmurs. "You're ready, Emily, just trust him." The little girl nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Her gaze remained fixed on Rex, who sat calmly, muscles coiled like a spring, waiting. The air in the courtroom seemed to thrum with anticipation. Everyone else, from the judge to the spectators to the lawyers, was unaware that this tiny child and a police dog were about to redefine the meaning of courage, intuition, and silent communication. And as the first witness on the stand prepared to answer a critical question, Emily took a deep breath. The room seemed to hold its collective breath as well. In that brief, suspended moment, nothing else mattered, except the bond between a little girl and a dog who understood her completely, and the extraordinary act that was about to unfold. The courtroom buzzed with the low hum of anticipation as the first witness began recounting the events of that fateful night. Ms. Lillian Moore, a neighbor who had claimed to hear suspicious noises near David Carter's home, sat stiffly in the witness box. She wrung her hands, glancing nervously at both the prosecution and defense teams. I heard a loud crash around 10 o'clock, she said softly, her voice trembling just enough to draw the jury's attention. "I thought someone had broken into Mr. Carter's house." Corinne Blake, the prosecutor, leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the jury and the gallery. "And did you see anyone?" she asked. The witness shook her head, her lips pressed tightly together. "No, I didn't see anyone, just the noise." Blake's tone remained calm but insistent. "Can you tell us if anything was out of place when you looked out the window afterward?" Emily, seated beside her father, leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving Rex. The German shepherd's ears twitched, his gaze fixed on the small girl as if reading her thoughts. He had sensed something earlier, an unusual energy from Emily, and now that anticipation intensified. She shifted her tiny body, murmuring a soft sound that only Rex could hear. To anyone else, it appeared as if she were just fidgeting or speaking quietly to herself. But in truth, she was sending signals, subtle gestures, and unspoken commands that the dog recognized instinctively. David Carter sat beside her, his hand resting lightly on hers. He tried to remain calm, though his heart raced. He had always trusted Emily's intuition, her quiet courage, her uncanny awareness, but he never imagined that her instincts could intersect so directly with the trained senses of a police dog in a courtroom. He squeezed her hand gently, whispering reassurance, "Stay steady, Emily. Just watch him." Meanwhile, Thomas Miller, the accused, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His eyes flicked toward Emily more than once, a sense of unease spreading across his face. There was something unnerving about the calm determination in a child's gaze, something he could not understand or anticipate. The whispers circulating through the courtroom did nothing to calm him. He could feel the tension mounting like an invisible weight pressing against the walls. Rex, alert and poised, shifted slightly in his position, his nose twitching as if detecting an invisible presence in the room. Officer Daniels noticed the movement but remained calm, allowing the dog's instincts to guide him. The K9 unit had been trained to detect stress, fear, and even subtle indicators of deception. But what was happening now went beyond ordinary training. Emily's gestures, her small murmurs, and her unwavering focus were prompting a response in Rex that was nothing short of extraordinary. The witness continued, her words painting an incomplete picture. I thought I heard someone leaving," she said hesitantly, wringing her hands. "But I didn't see clearly. The streetlight was flickering and her voice trailed off." Blake leaned forward, emphasizing key points to the jury. "So, you heard activity near Mr. Carter's property, but you cannot definitively identify who it was." The witness shook her head again, her uncertainty leaving gaps in the prosecution's narrative. Emily's small hand moved subtly, her fingers brushing against her father's. She whispered softly, "Rex, watch him." The German shepherd's ears flicked instantly. His posture shifted, muscles coiling in readiness. To any observer, it might have seemed like a trained response to general courtroom stimuli, but Emily's connection with Rex was far more precise. She was guiding his attention, directing his instincts toward a focal point, one that the adults in the room could not yet perceive. David Carter's pulse quickened as he felt the silent communication between his daughter and the dog. He could almost sense what Emily was thinking. She was aware of the gaps in the testimony, the inconsistencies, and the unspoken truths that the adults were missing. And she had the confidence, built from countless small interactions with Rex, that he would notice and respond appropriately. He tried to steady his breathing, reminding himself that the courtroom was filled with strangers who could not see the extraordinary partnership unfolding before them. The defense attorney, Jonathan Reed, began his cross-examination, speaking in his calm, measured tone. "Ms. Moore," he said, "you indicated that you did not see the person you heard. Are you certain that the noises weren't caused by something else? Perhaps a branch falling or an animal moving near the house?" The witness hesitated, her uncertainty evident, and Blake quickly objected, attempting to maintain the focus of the jury on the intended narrative. Emily's gaze remained fixed on Rex. She shifted slightly, leaning forward and raising a tiny finger in the dog's direction. "He needs to check," she murmured quietly, her voice just audible to him. Rex's ears twitched again, and he subtly rose on his haunches, alert but controlled. Officer Daniels noticed the movement, understanding that the dog was responding to an unusual cue, one not dictated by standard protocol. The courtroom's tension heightened as the audience sensed something extraordinary was about to occur, even if they did not yet know what. The judge paused, observing the unusual behavior. He glanced at Emily, then at Rex, noting the calm yet focused energy radiating from the small child. Something about the interaction seemed almost deliberate. He frowned slightly but allowed proceedings to continue, curious but cautious. He had never seen a child command the attention of a police dog in a courtroom before. Meanwhile, whispers began circulating in the gallery. Spectators leaned toward one another, trying to interpret the small movements between Emily and Rex. "Is the dog responding to her?" one whispered. "It looks like he's listening to her," another replied. Murmurs grew louder, but no one dared interrupt the trial. The tension was electric, a palpable anticipation that something extraordinary was about to unfold. Emily shifted again, her tiny body radiating confidence. She had noticed subtle cues in the courtroom, the nervous glance of Thomas Miller, the hesitant gestures of the witness, the slight tension in Rex's posture, and she began directing the dog's attention with precision. She whispered softly, almost inaudibly, "Watch him carefully." Rex responded instantly, muscles taut, ears alert, eyes fixed on the suspect. Officer Daniels, recognizing the dog's heightened focus, prepared to act if necessary. David Carter felt his heart race. Emily, his 3-year-old daughter, was orchestrating something he could barely comprehend, yet he trusted her instinct implicitly. He squeezed her hand, whispering encouragement, though she seemed entirely in control. The audience, the lawyers, and even the judge were unaware of the silent guidance taking place. It was as if a tiny conductor was leading a powerful, trained instrument, Rex, through an unseen symphony. The witness's voice faltered as she tried to continue her testimony. Emily's gaze never wavered from Rex, who subtly began shifting toward the suspect, sniffing the air with measured precision. Officer Daniels gave a slight nod, allowing the dog to follow its instincts. The jury leaned forward, sensing a shift, though none could fully explain why. Every person in the courtroom felt the intensity rising, as if the very air had thickened with suspense. Finally, Emily whispered 2 small words, barely audible: "Find him." Rex's eyes locked onto Thomas Miller, who shifted nervously, sensing a presence he could not see. The German Shepherd's body remained calm but alert, a perfect balance of training and instinct. Emily's father held his breath, watching the interaction with awe and fear. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath alongside them, unaware of the extraordinary silent communication that had just taken place. For the first time, it became clear that this trial was no ordinary case. A 3-year-old girl, guided by instinct and courage, was quietly directing the actions of a police dog whose training was unmatched. The ordinary proceedings of law were about to be influenced by a partnership that no one in the courtroom could have predicted, a bond that combined innocence, intuition, and an unspoken understanding that would soon alter the course of events forever. The courtroom had settled into a tense, almost suffocating quiet. Witnesses had come and gone, evidence had been presented, and yet something intangible seemed to hang in the air, an electricity that no one could explain. Emily sat beside her father, her small fingers tightly wrapped around his hand, but her eyes were fixed on Rex. The German shepherd, calm yet alert, had been responding subtly to her gestures all morning. To anyone else, it appeared as if he was merely attentive, waiting for his handler's commands. But Emily knew better. She had been preparing for this moment for hours. Her gaze never wavered from the dog. Every flick of his ear, every tiny shift in his stance told her he was ready. She whispered softly to her father, "Now, Daddy, now." David Carter's heart thudded in his chest, but he nodded subtly, letting her take the lead. This was a moment of instinct, courage, and trust that went far beyond his understanding. Emily's confidence radiated in the smallest of movements, a tilt of her head, a slight raise of her tiny hand. Suddenly, Emily stood. The sudden movement drew gasps from the courtroom. All eyes turned to the little girl, her ponytail bouncing as she planted her feet firmly on the polished floor. Her small frame radiated determination. The murmurs grew louder, whispers spreading through the spectators. What is she doing? Why is she standing? Even Judge Whitman, seasoned and unflappable, leaned forward, squinting at the child. He had seen many unusual things in court, but never a toddler boldly standing before a courtroom filled with adults. Emily pointed directly at Rex. "Help him," she whispered, her voice soft but unwavering. The courtroom froze. Spectators leaned forward in astonishment. Lawyers halted mid-motion, pens hovering above notepads. The judge's gavel hovered uncertainly in his hand. The words were simple, just two, but carried a weight that no one could ignore. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Thomas Miller, the accused, felt an odd chill crawl down his spine, though he could not explain why. Rex's ears twitched, his body shifting subtly as he rose to his full height. Officer Daniels' hand instinctively rested on the dog's collar, though he made no attempt to stop him. Something extraordinary was unfolding. The German shepherd, trained to respond to subtle cues, was reading signals that went beyond normal commands. Emily's small voice and the gestures that accompanied it had communicated a clear instruction, and Rex was ready to act. The prosecutor, Corinne Blake, leaned forward, trying to maintain composure. "Your Honor, she began, but her words faltered. She could feel the room's energy shifting, a tension that had nothing to do with law and everything to do with what she was witnessing. The defense attorney, Jonathan Reed, froze mid-sentence, his eyes fixed on the child and the dog. He had faced aggressive witnesses, combative defendants, and unpredictable jurors, but this was unprecedented. Emily's father's heart pounded. He had known his daughter was brave, but seeing her stand before the entire courtroom and direct a police dog was more than awe-inspiring, it was terrifying. "Stay calm, Emily," he whispered, though he knew it was unnecessary. She was calm already, her small figure radiating focus and determination. She had done this before in quiet moments with Rex, guiding him with gestures and murmurs. Today, she did it in front of dozens of strangers, and yet nothing seemed to shake her. The spectators were mesmerized. Phones quietly lifted, cameras poised, but no one moved. Some whispered to neighbors, "Is she commanding the dog? It looks like he's listening to her." The tension in the room was palpable. A child, a toddler, was communicating with a police dog with a precision that defied explanation. Every eye in the courtroom was drawn to the silent interaction, waiting for the next move. Rex's body shifted closer to Thomas Miller. His tail remained low, his movements controlled, but his focus was unwavering. The German shepherd's trained instincts had detected something, a scent, a tension, a subtle irregularity that no one else had noticed. Emily's whisper, "Help him," had guided the dog to act not aggressively but with purpose. Officer Daniels' eyes widened. He had worked with Rex for years. and had never seen him respond with such precision to cues from anyone other than trained officers. The judge, Harold Whitman, leaned back in his chair, trying to regain composure. "Miss Emily," he said, his voice steady but laced with curiosity, "can you explain what you just indicated?" Emily looked up at him, her expression calm, unwavering. "Rex knows," she said simply. "He'll show us." The courtroom fell silent again, spectators exchanging bewildered glances. The words were short, but their implication resonated. She was confident in her knowledge that Rex would reveal something important, something that would alter the course of the trial. Thomas Miller's face drained of color. He shifted nervously in his seat, aware, instinctively, that the dog's attention had turned toward him for a reason. Every trained instinct in his body screamed caution, though he did not understand why a child could provoke such a reaction. He tried to maintain a defiant expression, but his eyes betrayed uncertainty, scanning the courtroom as if looking for an escape he knew did not exist. Rex took a step closer, sniffing the floor near the defendant's chair. The motion was precise and deliberate, controlled but unmistakable. Officer Daniels, now fully aware of the extraordinary situation, allowed the dog to continue. Emily's father held his breath, watching the perfect coordination between his daughter and Rex. The room, previously focused on the legal proceedings, had shifted its attention entirely to the dynamic between child and dog. Every person in the courtroom felt the suspense building, their anticipation nearly tangible. The murmurs of the spectators grew, whispers tinged with awe and disbelief. "The dog, he's moving toward him. She's directing him." Even seasoned court reporters paused, pens hovering over notepads. The judge, maintaining his judicial composure, nonetheless leaned forward, sensing the gravity of the moment. "Officer Daniels," he said carefully, "please explain your dog's behavior." Daniels cleared his throat, voice steady but tinged with surprise. "Your Honor, Rex is a K-9 trained for detection and response. Normally, he reacts to officer commands. However, he is responding to cues from this child, which is extraordinary. His focus is precise, deliberate, and indicates that he has detected something relevant to the case." The courtroom collectively inhaled. No one had ever witnessed such a phenomenon. A toddler directing a police dog in a courtroom, and the dog responding with exactness. Emily remained steady, her small hand lowered but still guiding Rex with subtle gestures. "He knows where the problem is," she whispered, as if explaining to her father. The judge, the lawyers, the spectators, none could deny the surreal reality unfolding before them. The room seemed suspended in time, every heartbeat synchronized with the anticipation of what Rex would do next. And then slowly, deliberately, Rex moved toward a partially obscured bag near the defendant's feet. His paws made almost no sound on the polished floor, but his presence was commanding. Officer Daniels followed, careful not to interfere, while Emily's father gripped her hand tightly, pride and apprehension mingling in equal measure. The courtroom watched, frozen in awe, as a child and a dog, connected by trust and instinct, began to reveal truths that words alone had not uncovered. For the first time in modern courtroom history, a toddler had issued instructions, and a police dog had acted upon them with precision. The spectators, the lawyers, and even the judge were witnesses to something extraordinary, an intuitive, silent communication between human and animal, a moment that defied expectation and logic. All eyes were fixed on the pair, waiting, breathless, for the revelation that was about to unfold. Rex paused near the edge of Thomas Miller's chair, his powerful nose twitching as he sniffed the air. The German shepherd's posture was alert but controlled, muscles coiled like springs, his eyes locked on a dark bag partially hidden under the bench. Officer Daniels followed cautiously, knowing from experience that Rex's instincts were rarely wrong. Yet today was different. The dog's unwavering focus was guided not by the usual commands, but by the subtle signals of a 3-year-old girl. Emily's small hand rose slightly, her fingers barely moving, a silent direction to Rex. "Go," she whispered softly, almost to herself. The tiny word carried immense authority, and Rex responded immediately. His paws moved with measured precision toward the bag, stopping just inches away. The courtroom remained utterly silent, spectators leaning forward, mesmerized by the unprecedented scene. Lawyers froze mid-note, and the judge adjusted his glasses, trying to process what he was seeing. A child had commanded a police dog, and the dog had obeyed flawlessly. The bag zipper had been partially hidden by the corner of the bench, overlooked in the morning's evidence review. Rex circled it, sniffing carefully, his tail low but tense. Officer Daniels knelt slightly, guiding him subtly, though allowing the dog to make the final decision. The courtroom's atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Emily's father gripped her hand tightly, heart racing. He had always trusted Emily's instincts, but he had never imagined that her cues could direct a trained police dog to uncover critical evidence in a courtroom. Thomas Miller shifted in his seat, his eyes widening as he noticed Rex's focus on the bag. Something in his expression betrayed fear, though he tried to maintain a composed facade. The spectators whispered nervously among themselves, sensing the gravity of the moment. "What is he doing?" someone muttered. "Is that the dog?" Another spectator shook their head, disbelief written across their face. Even the attorney seemed momentarily frozen, unable to move or speak, as Rex's trained precision commanded the room's attention. Emily's gaze remained fixed on Rex, unwavering and confident. She had known all along that the dog would respond, that his instincts would guide him to the missing piece of the puzzle. Her tiny fingers twitched subtly, signaling for him to inspect more closely. Rex's nose followed the scent of the bag, sniffing along its edges, and then he pawed at the zipper gently, as if indicating that the contents needed to be revealed. Officer Daniels knelt fully now, carefully opening the bag. Inside, neatly packed and partially concealed, were items reported stolen from David Carter's home: documents, electronics, and small valuables. Gasps filled the courtroom as the evidence became visible to all. Thomas Miller froze, unable to speak, realizing that the bag had been discovered not by chance, but through the coordinated efforts of a child and a dog. The jury leaned forward in astonishment. The prosecution, Corinne Blake, allowed a small smile to cross her face, impressed by the sudden breakthrough. Jonathan Reed, the defense attorney, opened his mouth to object, but paused, realizing that the evidence was irrefutable and had been revealed in a completely unorthodox yet undeniable manner. The judge's gavel hovered, uncertain whether to intervene, though he could not deny the legitimacy of the discovery. Emily remained seated, her posture calm and composed, though a small, proud smile played at her lips. She had known that Rex would respond, that the evidence would surface, and that justice would take a decisive turn. The silent communication between the two had been flawless, a combination of intuition, trust, and understanding that transcended words. She had guided him through subtle gestures, whispers, and unwavering focus, achieving something that no one in the courtroom could have predicted. Rex, still poised and alert, glanced back at Emily briefly, as if acknowledging her role in the discovery. Officer Daniels allowed the dog to stand beside the little girl, a sense of quiet pride and amazement evident in his eyes. The courtroom's energy had shifted. What had begun as a standard trial was now a spectacle of extraordinary human-animal coordination. Every person present, from the jury to the spectators, recognized the unusual magnitude of the event. The judge, Harold Whitman, finally cleared his throat, attempting to restore procedural order. "This court acknowledges the extraordinary nature of the events that have just occurred," he said, voice calm but firm. "The evidence retrieved by Officer Daniels and K9 Rex, guided by Miss Emily Carter, will be considered in full. The court is aware of the unprecedented circumstances and will proceed accordingly." The words seemed almost inadequate to describe the gravity of what had unfolded, but they captured the official recognition of Emily and Rex's actions. Spectators whispered among themselves, astonished at the unfolding scene. Cameras quietly captured the moment, but no technology could fully convey the intensity of the silent partnership between child and dog. Lawyers and court staff exchanged incredulous glances, unable to comprehend the extraordinary coordination they had just witnessed. The trial, once mundane and procedural, had transformed into a moment that would be remembered for years, a living testament to trust, intuition, and courage. Thomas Miller sat frozen, realizing that his defense had crumbled in an instant. The stolen items, now visible to all, aligned perfectly with the accounts of David Carter and the testimony already provided. His defiance faltered, replaced by a palpable fear that justice had finally found its evidence. The courtroom's collective attention was riveted, every eye focused on the child who had silently orchestrated the revelation and the dog who had executed it flawlessly. Emily's father could barely contain his emotions. He knelt slightly to speak softly to her. "You did it, Emily," he whispered, pride and awe mingling in his voice. She looked up at him, eyes shining, a quiet smile forming. "Rex helped," she replied, as if giving credit to the dog as much as acknowledging her own intuition. The bond between the girl and the German Shepherd had proven stronger than logic, procedure, or expectation. Spectators, now fully aware of the remarkable collaboration, erupted in quiet murmurs of admiration. "Did you see that?" one whispered. "A child directing a police dog," another replied. Even the journalists, trained to capture facts in quotes, paused in stunned silence, understanding that this moment would dominate headlines for months to come. The story was no longer just about a burglary. It was about courage, instinct, and the extraordinary ways humans and animals can work together. Officer Daniels patted Rex's flank, a mixture of pride and awe evident on his face. "Good boy, Rex," he murmured. The dog wagged his tail slightly, a quiet acknowledgement of the praise, then returned his attention briefly to Emily, as if waiting for the next instruction. Emily's hand brushed against his fur gently, a gesture of thanks and connection. The courtroom witnessed not just evidence being discovered, but a profound relationship between a child and a dog, one that defied ordinary understanding. The judge cleared his throat again, restoring formal proceedings. "The evidence recovered by K9 Rex will be admitted and considered," he said firmly. "This court acknowledges the unique circumstances and extraordinary contributions made by Miss Emily Carter in conjunction with the police dog." The words carried weight, formalizing the previously unimaginable sequence of events. The jury absorbed the information, their expressions a mix of shock, admiration, and curiosity. Emily's presence, once thought incidental, had become central to the trial. Her quiet courage and trust in Rex had uncovered critical evidence, shifting the balance of the case. The courtroom now fully appreciated the unique skills of the German Shepherd and the exceptional intuition of a 3-year-old girl. For the first time, spectators, lawyers, and officials alike were witnesses to a phenomenon that transcended standard judicial procedure, a testament to instinct, connection, and the extraordinary bond between child and dog. As the trial continued, the room remained charged with energy. Spectators whispered in awe, lawyers recalibrated their strategies, and the judge maintained a careful but respectful demeanor. Emily sat quietly, her tiny hands folded in her lap, eyes still occasionally flicking toward Rex. The dog remained at her side, alert and attentive, ready to respond should she signal again. The courtroom, once procedural and ordinary, had become a stage for courage, intuition, and the remarkable connection between a child and a police dog. And in that moment, as the stolen evidence was officially recognized, every person present understood that something extraordinary had occurred. A 3-year-old girl had silently guided a trained German Shepherd to uncover the truth, forever changing the courtroom's perception of instinct, intelligence, and the power of trust. The courtroom buzzed with a mix of disbelief, awe, and unease. Spectators leaned forward in their seats, whispering quietly to one another, unable to tear their eyes from the extraordinary scene. A 3-year-old girl had guided a police dog to uncover critical evidence, and the impact was still settling over everyone present. The stolen items lay exposed near Thomas Miller's feet, neatly packed in the bag Rex had uncovered. The evidence was undeniable. Judge Harold Whitman cleared his throat, attempting to regain order. "This court will maintain decorum," he said firmly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of amazement. "The evidence recovered by K-9 Rex, guided by Miss Emily Carter, will be officially admitted." His voice carried weight, acknowledging the extraordinary nature of the event while reminding the courtroom of its formal function. Every word seemed to hang in the air, heavy with significance. Thomas Miller slumped slightly in his chair, his usual composure shaken. His hands trembled faintly as he glanced toward the jury. The evidence had undone his defense completely. Even if he tried to argue the items had been placed there innocently, the combination of Emily's unerring guidance and Rex's precise detection left little room for doubt. His confident facade had cracked, replaced by fear and a dawning realization that he had underestimated the smallest person in the room. The defense attorney, Jonathan Reed, tried to regain control, adjusting his tie nervously. "Your Honor," he began, "while the discovery of these items is significant, we must consider," he paused, scanning the courtroom, faltering under the incredulous stares of spectators and jury alike. He struggled to find an argument. How could he challenge the precision of a trained K-9 responding to a child's cues? It was unprecedented, and no courtroom manual contained instructions for handling such a scenario. The prosecutor, Corinne Blake, rose, a faint smile crossing her face. She had anticipated challenges, objections, and procedural wrangling, but the sudden turn of events had tilted the case decisively in her favor. "Your Honor," she said, her tone measured but confident, "the evidence recovered is directly relevant to the charges. The method of discovery does not negate its validity. The items were stolen from Mr. Carter's home, and the K-9 unit, guided by Miss Emily, has correctly identified them. This is both admissible and crucial to this trial." Emily's father, David Carter, sat beside his daughter, his chest swelling with pride. He had watched his little girl navigate the tension of the courtroom with remarkable poise. From her earliest moments, Emily had shown intuition and bravery beyond her years. And now, in a formal, high-stakes environment, she had executed a silent command that no one else could replicate or even fully comprehend. He brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "You were incredible." She only smiled faintly, still focused on Rex. Rex remained at Emily's side, alert and poised, every muscle tense but controlled. Officer Daniels crouched slightly beside him, understanding the extraordinary nature of their performance. He had trained Rex for countless scenarios, searches, apprehensions, and even life-threatening situations, but nothing had prepared him for this. A toddler had guided the dog with perfect precision, and the results were undeniable. Every person in the courtroom could sense the unspoken communication that had occurred, though no one could articulate exactly how or why it had worked. Spectators whispered excitedly. Cameras discreetly captured images, though photographs could never truly convey the intensity of what had happened. "Did you see that?" one spectator murmured. "A little girl directing a police dog." Another nodded, eyes wide. "It's incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Even seasoned court reporters paused, jotting notes with deliberate care. Every detail mattered, but no words could fully capture the magnitude of the child's impact on the trial. The jury members leaned forward, eyes fixed on the evidence. The stolen items were unmistakably linked to Thomas Miller. The K-9's actions, guided by Emily, had effectively confirmed the prosecution's claims. One juror whispered to another, "That child, she's amazing. And the dog, he didn't miss a step." The silent collaboration between toddler and trained animal had transformed a routine courtroom drama into a near-miraculous revelation. Thomas Miller's hands trembled slightly as he attempted to protest. "Your Honor, this is absurd. A child cannot direct a police dog. This is," he faltered, realizing that the courtroom's collective attention and the undeniable evidence rendered his objections meaningless. Even the judge's stern gaze reinforced the futility of his argument. The courtroom seemed to collectively lean forward, as if holding its breath, waiting for the next pivotal moment. Emily's calm, unwavering presence contrasted sharply with the tension around her. She shifted slightly, whispering softly to Rex, "Check again." The German Shepherd's ears twitched, muscles flexing, and he began another careful inspection of the bag and its contents. Officer Daniels allowed the dog to proceed, fully aware that every motion was part of a coordinated, intuitive process that he had only partially witnessed. Emily's tiny gestures and quiet commands guided him with flawless precision. The additional inspection revealed even more, small items previously overlooked that clearly belonged to David Carter. The evidence, now complete, painted a compelling picture. The theft had been deliberate, calculated, and fully documented. Gasps and murmurs echoed through the gallery. Spectators were both astonished and captivated. Lawyers exchanged incredulous glances, recognizing the unorthodox but undeniably effective discovery. The judge, maintaining formal composure, could not conceal his astonishment entirely. Emily's father felt a swell of gratitude and pride. His daughter had navigated the complexities of human and canine communication in a formal courtroom environment with remarkable skill. He had worried moments before. How could a 3-year-old influence events in such a high-stakes setting? Yet Emily had not wavered. Her calm focus, her trust in Rex, and her quiet confidence had achieved what no adult could have orchestrated. Thomas Miller's face drained of color entirely. He realized with growing horror that the trial had shifted irrevocably. The combination of Emily's guidance and Rex's precise instincts had removed any ambiguity from the case. His defenses, once confidently argued, now seemed laughable and futile. The stolen items were undeniable proof, and the witness testimony, previously inconclusive, now aligned seamlessly with the evidence. The courtroom remained charged with suspense. Spectators whispered, lawyers recalibrated their strategies, and the jury absorbed the significance of the events. Emily remained calm, her gaze occasionally flicking to Rex. The German Shepherd stayed perfectly at her side, a subtle wag of his tail acknowledging her silent command. Officer Daniels patted the dog gently, a mixture of pride, amazement, and respect evident on his face. Judge Whitman finally spoke again, restoring formal proceedings. "This court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances under which the evidence has been recovered," he said, voice steady. "The contributions of Miss Emily Carter in conjunction with K9 Rex have been remarkable. The jury is instructed to consider the evidence as presented, regardless of the method of discovery. The proceedings will continue accordingly." His words brought a sense of official weight to what had occurred, validating the unprecedented collaboration between child and dog. Emily's tiny hands rested gently in her lap as she watched the courtroom. Her role, once underestimated, had become central to the case. She had guided Rex to uncover the truth, relying on intuition, trust, and the silent communication they had practiced countless times before. The courtroom, now fully aware of their extraordinary partnership, seemed united in awe and admiration. The jurors whispered quietly among themselves, clearly impressed. Even the skeptics in the gallery had been silenced. The case, once uncertain and procedural, now had clarity and undeniable direction. Emily's courage, focus, and unwavering belief in Rex had transformed a typical trial into a remarkable display of human-animal collaboration. As the trial proceeded, Emily's father leaned over to whisper, "You were amazing, Emily. I'm so proud of you." She looked up briefly, a small smile playing at her lips. "We did it, Daddy," she replied softly, glancing at Rex, who remained alert and obedient at her side. In that moment, the courtroom was no longer merely a place of legal proceedings. It had become a stage for courage, intuition, and the extraordinary bond between a child and a police dog. The courtroom seemed to vibrate with a tense stillness. Every person present, jury members, lawyers, spectators, even the judge, was fixated on the bag of recovered items. The stolen belongings of David Carter had been revealed through the extraordinary coordination of a 3-year-old girl and a German Shepherd. But it was not just the discovery itself that left the courtroom awestruck. It was the undeniable clarity of the truth. Emily's small figure, poised beside Rex, radiated a quiet authority that made even the most experienced adults pause. Thomas Miller, the accused, could feel the walls closing in. His confident posture had crumbled into a tense rigidity. Each stolen item Rex had uncovered seemed to slam another nail into the coffin of his defense. His mind raced, trying to imagine an argument that could negate what had occurred, but the impossible precision of a toddler's commands to a fully trained police dog left him speechless. Every person in the room could sense his fear. The jurors leaned forward, notebooks forgotten. Their expressions ranged from astonishment to admiration, and a few shook their heads in disbelief. They had never witnessed anything like this. A child influencing events in a legal trial through intuition and silent communication with a trained dog. Their task was to remain impartial, but it was impossible to ignore the extraordinary circumstances. The truth had been revealed in a way they would never forget. Judge Harold Whitman's gavel hovered midair, almost trembling with the weight of what he was about to formalize. The court recognizes the extraordinary contributions of Miss Emily Carter and K9 Rex, he said firmly, his voice echoing across the room. Their actions have uncovered crucial evidence in this case. The court acknowledges that this method of discovery is highly unconventional, yet the evidence is verifiable, tangible, and admissible. Proceedings will continue with this consideration. The judge paused, allowing his words to sink in, while every spectator and participant absorbed the magnitude of what had just occurred. Corinne Blake, the prosecutor, rose with a composed but unmistakable sense of triumph. "Your Honor, members of the jury," she said, her voice steady, "the evidence has been recovered, verified, and is directly linked to the defendant, Thomas Miller. The K9 unit, guided by Miss Emily Carter, has facilitated the discovery. This is irrefutable proof that the items were stolen from Mr. Carter's residence and are now properly accounted for. The defendant cannot reasonably deny this." Emily's father, David Carter, felt a lump in his throat. His daughter, barely 3 years old, had performed what no adult could orchestrate. Her courage, intuition, and trust in Rex had revealed the truth in a courtroom where doubt had lingered just hours before. He brushed a curl from her forehead, whispering softly, "You were amazing, Emily. Simply amazing." She looked up at him briefly, her tiny smile calm but radiant. "Rex helped," she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of pride and partnership. Rex, still alert, stood beside Emily, ears perked, tail low but tense. Officer Daniels gently patted the dog's flank, a quiet acknowledgement of the German Shepherd's extraordinary performance. "Good boy, Rex," he murmured. The dog's gaze flicked toward Emily, as if acknowledging the tiny girl who had guided him with silent commands. It was a rare moment of quiet, a testament to their unspoken connection. Thomas Miller attempted a weak protest. "Your Honor, this is absurd. How can a child dictate the actions of a trained officer's dog? This is not standard procedure." But his objections faltered. Judge Whitman raised a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Miller, the court has recognized the evidence as admissible. Your arguments regarding method do not negate the validity of the items recovered. Please remain seated." The words struck like a hammer, final, undeniable, leaving Miller with little room to maneuver. The gallery erupted into murmurs of admiration. Spectators exchanged looks of disbelief and awe. "A child, she actually did it," whispered one woman. "The dog, he didn't miss a single thing," another replied, her eyes wide. Even seasoned reporters paused mid-note, realizing they were witnessing a story that would dominate headlines for months. The courage, intuition, and teamwork between a 3-year-old girl and a German Shepherd in a real-life courtroom drama. Emily's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the tension surrounding her. She shifted slightly, whispering a few inaudible words to Rex. The dog responded subtly, turning his attention back to her, acknowledging the tiny gestures she had made throughout the trial. It was a quiet moment, almost tender in its intensity, showing the extraordinary bond between child and canine. Every person in the courtroom could sense it, though they could not fully comprehend the depth of the connection. David Carter's emotions welled up. He had spent weeks preparing his daughter for this day, training her subtly with Rex, nurturing the trust and communication between them. but even he had not imagined how powerful their bond would become under the extraordinary pressure of a real courtroom. Emily had not faltered. She had executed her instincts perfectly. Her bravery and clarity had exposed the truth with an elegance that words alone could not convey. The jury, still visibly stunned, absorbed every detail of the evidence. The stolen items matched the inventory from David Carter's home perfectly. Each item, each object, had been uncovered with uncanny precision, guided entirely by Emily's gestures and Rex's trained instincts. There was no ambiguity left. The truth had emerged not just through conventional testimony, but through a remarkable display of trust, intuition, and silent communication. Corinne Blake concluded her address, her voice calm but charged with conviction. Members of the jury, you have witnessed an extraordinary demonstration today. The evidence recovered by K9 Rex, guided by Miss Emily Carter, is complete, verifiable, and directly linked to the defendant. The method may be unusual, but the result is undeniable. The law recognizes the truth that has been revealed. It is now your responsibility to deliberate based on the facts. Thomas Miller slumped back in his chair, pale and defeated. Every option he had imagined to contest the trial had evaporated. He could no longer argue uncertainty or doubt. The stolen items, verified and accounted for, left him exposed. His defense, once confident and deliberate, had crumbled under the weight of a child's courage and a dog's precision. For the first time, he realized the full magnitude of underestimating both innocence and instinct. The courtroom seemed to exhale collectively. The tension that had gripped the room for hours began to dissipate, replaced by awe and quiet reverence. Spectators, jurors, lawyers, and court staff alike were united in a recognition of something extraordinary. A child, no older than 3, had guided a police dog to uncover the truth, revealing evidence that had eluded conventional procedures. Justice had been served not just through law, but through courage, trust, and an unbreakable bond. Emily's father leaned down, brushing a hand across her forehead. "You were incredible," he whispered again. She glanced up at him, a small, triumphant smile on her face. "We did it," she replied softly, gesturing toward Rex. The dog stood attentively beside her, ears perked, tail low but steady, embodying the quiet power of their shared mission. Officer Daniels gave a subtle nod, a quiet salute to the child who had orchestrated a legal breakthrough with grace and precision. Judge Whitman cleared his throat, restoring the formal cadence of the court. "The court recognizes the significance of today's proceedings. The evidence is admitted, the extraordinary circumstances noted, and the trial will continue with the weight of these facts in mind." His voice carried authority, but there was a subtle undercurrent of awe, an acknowledgement of the unprecedented events that had unfolded. As the courtroom settled, Emily quietly returned to her seat beside her father. Her small fingers intertwined with his, a gentle squeeze of reassurance. She had acted with courage, clarity, and an unshakable sense of purpose. Her partnership with Rex had revealed the truth in a way that no adult could replicate. Every witness, lawyer, and spectator had witnessed the extraordinary synergy between a child's intuition and a dog's trained instinct. In that moment, the trial transformed. What had begun as a standard burglary case had become a story of trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Emily had shown that even the smallest among us could make an enormous impact. And Rex, the loyal and disciplined German Shepherd, had demonstrated that instinct and training could achieve the impossible when guided by trust. The courtroom had settled into an unusual calm after the dramatic revelation of the stolen items. Every person present, jurors, lawyers, spectators, and even the judge, was still absorbing the extraordinary events that had just unfolded. A 3-year-old girl had guided a German Shepherd to uncover critical evidence, and now the trial was poised to reach its conclusion. The air was thick with anticipation, the tension slowly giving way to quiet awe. Judge Harold Whitman adjusted his glasses and addressed the jury. "Members of the jury, you have witnessed evidence recovered under extraordinary circumstances. The court recognizes the actions of Miss Emily Carter and K9 Rex as instrumental in revealing the truth. It is now your responsibility to deliberate and reach a verdict based on the facts presented. His voice, steady and formal, carried the weight of authority, but it could not disguise the astonishment in his expression. The jurors gathered their notes and exchanged quiet glances. The magnitude of what they had witnessed, an infant directing a highly trained police dog to uncover hidden evidence, had left them both awed and contemplative. They could not ignore the combination of courage, intuition, and disciplined training that had led to this outcome. Every detail, from Emily's subtle gestures to Rex's precise responses, underscored the undeniable truth. The stolen items had been recovered, and the defendant's defense had been invalidated. Thomas Miller sat in the defendant's chair, pale and defeated. His hands trembled slightly as he glanced toward the jury, hoping for a glimmer of mercy, a loophole he could exploit. But the evidence was irrefutable. Every stolen item had been accounted for, and the jurors had witnessed firsthand the accuracy of Rex's detection, guided by Emily's silent commands. The realization sank in. The trial was over, his fate sealed by circumstances he could neither manipulate nor control. Corinne Blake, the prosecutor, rose to summarize the case, her voice calm but resolute. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the evidence is clear. The stolen items were recovered and verified. The actions of K9 Rex, guided by Miss Emily Carter, confirm the facts beyond reasonable doubt. The defendant, Thomas Miller, orchestrated the theft, and the recovery of these items leaves no ambiguity. Justice has been served, and it is now your duty to return a verdict consistent with the truth." Emily sat quietly beside her father, hands folded in her lap. Though she was only 3 years old, her presence had transformed the trial. She had navigated tension, fear, and uncertainty with astonishing poise. Rex remained alert at her side, ears perked, tail low but steady, fully attuned to her slightest gesture. The courtroom had witnessed something unprecedented. The seamless collaboration between a child and a police dog, an unspoken bond capable of revealing truth in the most extraordinary way. Officer Daniels gently patted Rex on the shoulder, acknowledging the dog's exceptional work. "Good boy," he murmured. The German shepherd's eyes flicked toward Emily briefly, almost as if acknowledging the tiny girl who had guided him through the trial. Emily's father, David Carter, brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, whispering softly, "You were amazing. You helped uncover the truth." Emily glanced up at him, a small smile playing across her lips. "We did it, Daddy," she said quietly, her gaze returning to Rex. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath as the jury filed back to announce their decision. The judge rose slightly, his expression serious but tinged with anticipation. "Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict?" he asked. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with a calm demeanor, stood and cleared her throat. "Yes, Your Honor, we have." Her voice carried the weight of authority and finality. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Thomas Miller, guilty on all counts of theft." A collective gasp of acknowledgement swept through the courtroom. Spectators whispered in astonishment. Even the defense attorney seemed momentarily stunned, unable to immediately respond. Thomas Miller sank back in his chair, pale and defeated. His defense had been undone in a way no courtroom drama had ever seen, by the quiet courage and intuition of a tiny girl and the precise instincts of a German shepherd. Judge Whitman's gavel struck the desk with finality. "The jury has rendered its verdict. The court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances under which the evidence was discovered. This trial has demonstrated not only the efficacy of law enforcement but the remarkable intuition and courage of one young child. Justice will now proceed in accordance with the jury's decision." His voice echoed through the courtroom, formal and commanding, yet beneath it lay a subtle note of awe at the unprecedented events that had unfolded. Corinne Blake allowed herself a faint smile, satisfied that justice had been served. The prosecution's case had been vindicated, and the stolen items were accounted for. But more than that, the courtroom had witnessed something extraordinary, a reminder of the power of intuition, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Emily's father leaned down to whisper to her again, "You were incredible today. Everyone saw it." She looked up, eyes shining, and whispered back, "Rex helped." The German shepherd, ever attentive, shifted slightly closer to her, tail wagging faintly. Officer Daniels nodded quietly, acknowledging the unique partnership that had led to this outcome. Spectators continued to murmur among themselves, many exchanging amazed glances. Cameras had captured images, but no photograph could convey the depth of the connection between Emily and Rex, the silent communication that had guided the dog to uncover critical evidence. Words alone could not capture the courage, intuition, and precision that had saved the day. The courtroom gradually emptied. The trial concluded, but the story far from forgotten. News crews waited outside, eager to cover the unprecedented events, though the magnitude of what had occurred could not be fully captured by headlines or television cameras. Emily's bravery, Rex's loyalty, and the unique bond between them had transformed an ordinary courtroom into a stage for courage and truth. David Carter gathered Emily in his arms, holding her gently. "You were amazing," he whispered again, pride evident in every word. Emily rested her head against his shoulder, calm and content. Rex sat nearby, obedient and watchful, a silent guardian of the truth they had uncovered together. Officer Daniels gave a respectful nod, understanding that the events of the day were historic, a testament to the extraordinary abilities of both child and dog. In the weeks following the trial, the story of Emily and Rex became a sensation. News articles, television reports, and social media posts celebrated the courage of a tiny girl who had guided a police dog to uncover the truth. Experts marveled at the intuitive bond between humans and animals, noting that few cases had ever demonstrated such precise coordination. Emily became an emblem of bravery and instinct, Rex a symbol of loyalty and training. For David Carter, the experience was deeply personal. He had always known his daughter was special, perceptive beyond her years, but seeing her navigate a real courtroom with composure, courage, and clarity had left him in awe. And Rex, ever faithful, had responded with unmatched precision, a perfect partner in a moment that demanded nothing less than perfection. Thomas Miller faced the consequences of his actions, his conviction a testament to the undeniable evidence revealed through the extraordinary partnership of child and dog. Justice had been served, but the courtroom and everyone present had witnessed something far greater than a simple verdict. They had seen courage, intuition, and the power of trust manifested in a way that would not soon be forgotten. As the courthouse emptied and the echoes of the trial faded, Emily held Rex's paw gently in her small hand. She had faced an impossible situation and with courage and guidance had achieved the unthinkable. Her father, watching, felt a profound sense of gratitude and pride. Together, they had proven that even the smallest among us can make an enormous impact when trust, courage, and instinct guide the way. And in the quiet moments that followed, Emily and Rex shared a simple, unspoken acknowledgement of their unique bond. The trial was over, justice had been served, and yet the story of a little girl, a loyal police dog, and the power of intuition would live on in the memories of all who had witnessed it.